The autumn rain pattered against the windows of the small video rental shop on Market Street in St. Andrews, Scotland. Sarah Mitchell wiped down the counter for the third time that evening, glancing at the clock above the door. Nearly closing time, and the shop had been unusually quiet for a Friday night. Students from university usually flooded in around this time, eager to grab movies for their weekend plans. The bell above the door chimed as two young men entered, shaking raindrops from their jackets. Sarah looked up from organizing the returned DVDs and felt her breath catch. Even in the dim lighting of the shop, she recognized the taller of the two immediately. Prince William, second in line to the British throne, stood in her modest video store, looking remarkably ordinary in his worn jeans and university sweater. His companion, whom Sarah would later learn was his roommate and close friend, browsed the comedy section while William wandered toward the action movies. Sarah tried to act normal, but her hands trembled slightly as she continued her work. She had known William attended the University of St. Andrews, but seeing him in person in such an everyday setting felt surreal. The prince moved with the casual confidence of any university student, running his fingers along the movie spines as he searched for something interesting. His protection officers were nowhere to be seen, though Sarah suspected they were nearby, maintaining their watch from a distance. This was part of the agreement that had allowed William to attend university with some semblance of normal student life. William picked up a copy of The Matrix and examined the back cover. His friend called over from across the shop, holding up a comedy. "What about this one?" Emma said it was brilliant. William shook his head with a grin. "We watched that last week, remember? You fell asleep halfway through." Their easy banter reminded Sarah that beneath the royal title, William was just a 20-year-old student trying to enjoy his Friday night like everyone else. She had read about his decision to attend St. Andrews, how it represented his desire for a more normal university experience away from the intense scrutiny of London. The shop's atmosphere changed when another customer entered. James Crawford, a local man in his 30s who worked at the nearby hardware store, stepped inside and immediately spotted William. His reaction was far from subtle. He pulled out his mobile phone and began taking pictures, the camera flash illuminating the small shop. "Excuse me," Sarah said firmly, stepping forward. Photography isn't allowed in the store. She had dealt with this situation before when local celebrities or minor TV personalities visited, but never with someone of William's stature. James ignored her, continuing to snap photos as he moved closer to William. "Can't believe it's really you," he said loudly. "Wait until I tell everyone at the pub." Prince William shopping for movies like a regular person. William's demeanor shifted slightly. The relaxed young man transformed into someone more guarded, more aware of his surroundings. His friend moved closer, creating a subtle barrier between William and the photographer. This was the reality William faced constantly, the delicate balance between wanting normal experiences and managing his public role. Sarah felt a surge of protectiveness. This was her shop, her responsibility, and these students were her customers. She walked around the counter with purpose. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to put away your phone. You're disturbing other customers." James laughed dismissively. "Come on, love. It's Prince William. This is news." He continued taking pictures, now including Sarah in some of the shots. William remained calm, but clearly uncomfortable. His evening out transformed into an unwanted photo session. The situation escalated when James began asking William personal questions loudly, trying to provoke responses that might make good quotes. "What do you think about your father's latest comments? Are you dating anyone at university? What's it like being waited on hand and foot?" William's friend stepped forward. "Look, mate, we just came in to rent a movie. Can you give us some space?" His tone was polite but firm, the kind of diplomatic approach that came from being close to someone in William's position. James became more aggressive, sensing a story. He positioned himself near the exit, effectively blocking the prince's path out of the shop. "Just a few questions. The people have a right to know what their future king is up to." Sarah realized the situation was spiraling beyond her control. She had no training for dealing with royal protocols or aggressive photographers. Her small shop had become the center of an uncomfortable confrontation, with William caught in the middle through no fault of his own. The prince handled the situation with remarkable composure for someone his age. He didn't raise his voice or show obvious irritation. Instead, he turned to Sarah with a polite smile. "I think we'll come back another time. Thank you for your help." But James wasn't finished. He followed them toward the door, continuing his barrage of questions and photos. "Are you too good to shop where normal people shop? Is this beneath you now?" Sarah watched the scene unfold with growing frustration. This wasn't fair to William, who had simply wanted to rent a movie like any other student. The aggressive behavior was turning her shop into a hostile environment, something she had worked hard to avoid since taking over the business from her father. William reached for the door handle, clearly eager to leave the uncomfortable situation behind. His friend flanked him protectively, scanning the street outside for any additional photographers or curious onlookers who might have been attracted by the commotion. As they prepared to exit, Sarah made a decision that would soon make headlines across the country. She couldn't let this harassment continue in her establishment. Her shop was supposed to be a welcoming place for all customers, including university students who just wanted to enjoy their Friday nights in peace. The rain continued falling outside, turning the narrow streets of St. Andrews into ribbons of reflected light from the street lamps. Inside the video shop, a moment of truth was approaching that would change how the royal family viewed their security protocols and how the media reported on William's university life. Sarah's decision came swiftly and decisively. As William reached for the door handle, she stepped between James and the exit. "Actually, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the small shop. "Now." James looked shocked. "Me? I'm a paying customer. I come here every week." He gestured toward William. "He's the one causing all the fuss just by being here." "You're harassing my customers," Sarah replied firmly. "That's not acceptable in my shop, regardless of who they are." She moved toward the counter where the phone was located. "I'll call the police if necessary." William and his friend exchanged glances. This wasn't how royal incidents usually played out. Typically, security personnel would handle such situations, or William would simply leave quietly to avoid escalation. Having a shop owner defend him so directly was both unexpected and somewhat refreshing. James became indignant. "This is ridiculous. I have every right to be here. You can't throw me out for taking a few pictures." He continued holding his phone, though he had stopped photographing for the moment. Sarah reached for the telephone, her hand hovering over the receiver. "Watch me," she said quietly. Her father had taught her that running a business meant protecting all customers equally, whether they were local farmers or university professors. Tonight, that principle extended to a future king. The standoff lasted several tense seconds. James realized that Sarah was serious about involving the authorities. He also noticed that William and his friend had moved away from the door, watching the confrontation with interest rather than fleeing immediately. "This is mental," James muttered, shoving his phone into his pocket. "All this fuss over someone who probably doesn't even know what real work is like." He shot a resentful glance toward William before heading for the exit. As James opened the door, Sarah called after him. "And James? You're banned from the shop until you learn some manners." The bell chimed his departure, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. William stood near the action movie section, clearly surprised by the turn of events. His friend broke the silence first. "Well, that was intense." He looked at Sarah with genuine appreciation. "Thank you. That was getting pretty uncomfortable." Sarah felt her adrenaline beginning to subside. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, she became acutely aware of who she had just offended. She had essentially thrown out a local customer to protect the future king of England. The irony wasn't lost on her. "I'm sorry that happened," she said to William. "Some people don't understand boundaries." She paused, then added with a slight smile, "Though I suppose you deal with that a lot more than most people." William laughed, the tension finally breaking. You'd be surprised how rarely someone actually takes action like that. Usually, people either completely ignore what's happening or they join in. He picked up the Matrix again, examining it thoughtfully. "I appreciate what you did." His friend browsed the comedy section again, the atmosphere in the shop returning to something approaching normal. So what are we thinking? Action? Comedy? Something completely different. Sarah resumed her position behind the counter, trying to process what had just occurred. She had read articles about William's desire for normal university experiences, but witnessing it firsthand gave her new perspective on the challenges he faced. Every simple activity carried the potential for unwanted attention and confrontation. Actually, William said, approaching the counter with 2 DVDs, "Could we rent these?" He had selected The Matrix and Lock, Stock, and 2 smoking barrels, both popular choices among university students. Sarah began processing the rental, grateful for the return to routine business operations. "Do you have a membership card?" she asked, then immediately felt foolish. Of course, he didn't have a standard video shop membership. "I don't," William admitted. "I've never actually rented movies before. We usually things are usually provided for us." He seemed slightly embarrassed by this admission. "No problem," Sarah said, pulling out a membership application form. "I'll just need some basic information." She slid the form across the counter, then realized the absurdity of asking Prince William for his address and phone number. William's friend stepped forward. "Maybe I could put it under my name? I already have an account here." He produced his membership card, solving the awkward moment diplomatically. As Sarah processed the rental, she noticed William examining the shop more carefully. He seemed genuinely interested in the way the business operated, asking questions about which movies were popular with students and how the rental system worked. "Do you get many people from the university?" he asked, browsing the new releases section near the counter. "Quite a few," Sarah replied, "especially on weekends. Students seem to prefer having movie nights in their halls rather than going out to the cinema all the time. More affordable, I suppose." William nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. We've been doing a lot of that lately, too. Easier than dealing with crowds and photographers every time you want to see a film." His casual reference to his unique circumstances struck Sarah as remarkably matter-of-fact. He wasn't complaining or seeking sympathy, merely stating a reality that shaped his daily decisions. The rental transaction completed smoothly, with William's friend providing his details while William examined the shop's layout with continued curiosity. He seemed particularly interested in how Sarah organized the different genres and which sections attracted the most customer traffic. "This is quite different from what I expected," William admitted. "I mean, I knew these places existed, but I never really thought about how they worked. It's actually quite clever, this whole system." Sarah smiled at his genuine enthusiasm for something most people took for granted. "My father started the business 10 years ago. He always said that movies bring people together, give them something to share and talk about." "That's true," William agreed. "Some of my best friendships at university have started over discussions about films." He glanced toward his friend, who was now examining the foreign film section with academic interest. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of voices outside the shop. Through the rain-streaked windows, they could see several people gathering across the street, some pointing toward the video store. Word was spreading about William's presence. His friend noticed the growing crowd immediately. "Looks like we should probably head back," he suggested quietly. Their peaceful evening out was transforming into a public spectacle, exactly what they had hoped to avoid. William sighed, almost imperceptibly. The real world was intruding once again on his attempt at normal student life. Sarah watched his expression change, seeing the resignation that came with constant public scrutiny. "Actually," Sarah said suddenly, an idea forming in her mind, "there might be another way out." Sarah led William and his friend toward the back of the shop, past the horror movie section, and through a narrow doorway that most customers never noticed. "My father installed this when he first opened," she explained, unlocking a door that connected to the alley behind the building. "Sometimes we need to receive deliveries without blocking the front entrance." The back exit opened onto a quiet cobblestone alley that ran parallel to Market Street. Rain continued falling steadily, but the narrow passage was empty of curious onlookers and photographers. Street lamps cast pools of yellow light at regular intervals, creating a pathway back toward the university area. "This is perfect," William's friend said, clearly relieved. Much better than trying to push through that crowd out front. He zipped up his jacket against the rain and checked his watch. We can be back at the hall in 10 minutes if we take the long way around. William lingered in the doorway, looking back in his shop where Sarah was gathering her keys to lock up behind them. I feel terrible that you had to close early because of us, he said. That's lost business for you. Sarah waved away his concern. Friday nights are usually slow anyway. Most people rent their movies earlier in the week. She paused, then added honestly, besides, I probably wouldn't have sold much with that crowd gathering outside. As they prepared to leave, William turned back to Sarah with an expression of genuine gratitude. What you did tonight, standing up to that man, most people would have either ignored it or encouraged it for the spectacle. My father always taught me to treat all customers fairly, Sarah replied. That includes protecting them from harassment, regardless of who they are. She smiled slightly. Though I admit this was a first for me. The three of them stepped into the alley, and Sarah locked the back door securely. The rain created a peaceful backdrop, muffling the distant sounds of the crowd still gathered on Market Street. For a moment, they stood together in the quiet space, an oddly normal conclusion to a very unusual evening. William's friend started walking toward the university, but William hesitated. Sarah, I have to ask, aren't you curious about all this? About meeting me, I mean? Most people have questions or want something. Sarah considered this thoughtfully. Honestly, I was more concerned with keeping my shop from turning into a circus. You seem like a nice young man who just wanted to rent some movies with his friend. That's really all that mattered to me in the moment. Her straightforward answer seemed to surprise William. He was accustomed to people being either overly deferential or aggressively intrusive when they met him. Sarah's practical approach was refreshingly different. That's quite rare, he admitted. Usually encounters like this become much more complicated. He adjusted his jacket collar against the rain. I suppose I should ask, will you be telling people about this? The newspapers, I mean. Sarah looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Why would I do that? You came into my shop to rent movies, not to give interviews. What happens in my business stays in my business. This response clearly pleased William, though he tried not to show it too obviously. His friend had moved ahead and was now waiting under a street lamp, politely giving them space to finish their conversation while keeping an eye on potential exits from the alley. I hope this won't cause problems for you, William said. Sometimes when people help me, it creates unwanted attention for them later. Reporters can be quite persistent. Sarah shrugged pragmatically. I can handle reporters. I've been dealing with difficult customers since I was 12 and started helping my father after school. She locked the video shop door and tested it to ensure it was secure. Besides, what are they going to write? Shop owner asks disruptive customer to leave? That's hardly front-page news. William smiled at her confidence, though he suspected she underestimated the media's interest in any story involving the royal family. Still, her matter-of-fact attitude was refreshing and somewhat reassuring. As they began walking toward the street that would take William back to his student accommodation, Sarah remembered something important. Your movies, she said suddenly. You forgot your rental DVDs. William stopped and laughed. After all that, we completely forgot why we came in the first place. He looked back toward the shop, then at his friend who was already several yards ahead. I don't suppose you could hold them for us until next week? Of course, Sarah agreed. Though next time, maybe call ahead. I could have them ready for pickup, maybe during quieter hours. Next time, William seemed pleased by the suggestion that he would be welcome to return. Many businesses either banned him after incidents like tonight's or made such a fuss over his presence that normal transactions became impossible. Well, you are university students, Sarah pointed out practically. I imagine you want to rent more movies during the term. Just maybe avoid Friday evenings when people have been drinking. They reached the end of the alley, where it connected to a side street that would allow William and his friend to avoid the crowd on Market Street. The rain was beginning to ease, though the cobblestones remained slick and reflective. Thank you again, William said, as they prepared to part ways. For everything. It's been quite an educational evening. Sarah watched as the two young men disappeared into the Scottish night, their figures quickly obscured by the rain and shadows. She stood alone in the alley for a moment, processing what had just occurred. In the space of an hour, her quiet video rental shop had become the site of a royal incident, a confrontation, and an unlikely friendship. As she walked back to the front of her shop to collect her car, Sarah noticed that the crowd across the street had largely dispersed. A few dedicated individuals remained, still hoping for another glimpse of William, but most had given up and headed home or to the local pubs to share their stories. She drove home through the empty streets of St. Andrews, past the university buildings where William was probably settling in for a movie night with friends, just as he had originally planned. Sarah couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. She had defended a future king, banned a local customer, and closed her shop early, all because someone couldn't respect basic courtesy. What she didn't realize was that across town, in the comfortable common room of a student hall, William was telling his friends about the shop owner who had treated him like any other customer. The story would spread through his circle of friends, then to their families, and eventually to people who made decisions about royal security and media relations. Sarah Mitchell, without knowing it, had just changed how the royal family thought about ordinary interactions with the British public. 3 days later, Sarah was restocking the comedy section when the bell above her shop door chimed. She looked up to see a well-dressed woman in her 40s, wearing an expensive coat and carrying a leather briefcase. The woman didn't look like a typical movie renter. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" the woman asked, approaching the counter with purposeful steps. "Yes, I'm Sarah. Can I help you with something?" Sarah closed the DVD case she had been examining and gave the visitor her full attention. The woman extended a business card. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from the Royal Press Office. I understand you had an encounter with Prince William on Friday evening." Sarah's heart sank. Despite William's optimism that the incident would remain private, the story had apparently reached official channels. She accepted the business card, noting the royal crest embossed at the top. "I'm not looking for trouble," Sarah said carefully. "I just try to run my business normally." Jennifer smiled reassuringly. "You're not in any trouble at all. Quite the opposite, actually. I wanted to thank you personally for how you handled the situation. Prince William was very impressed with your professionalism." This wasn't what Sarah had expected. She had been preparing herself for a conversation about royal protocols or perhaps a request to sign some sort of confidentiality agreement. "I'm glad he wasn't upset," she said cautiously. "The prince specifically asked me to express his gratitude," Jennifer continued. "It's rare for him to encounter people who treat him so naturally. Most individuals either become overly formal or, as you experienced, inappropriately intrusive." Sarah relaxed slightly, though she remained curious about why the Royal Press Office would send someone to her small shop. "It really wasn't that big a deal. I would have done the same thing for any customer." "That's exactly what made it remarkable," Jennifer explained. "Prince William values normal interactions more than you might realize. His university experience is very important to him, and encounters like yours help make that possible." The conversation was interrupted when several customers entered the shop together, clearly university students looking for weekend entertainment. Sarah automatically shifted into business mode, greeting them and directing them toward the new releases. Jennifer observed quietly as Sarah helped the students find movies, answered questions about return dates, and processed their rentals with efficient friendliness. It was clear that Sarah treated all her customers with the same respectful approach she had shown William. When the students left with their selections, Jennifer resumed the conversation. "I'd like to discuss something with you, if you have time. It's about future visits." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Future visits?" "Prince William would like to continue using your shop occasionally during his time at university," Jennifer explained. "Obviously, we can't guarantee that situations like Friday won't happen again, but we'd like to minimize them when possible." "What would that involve?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious about how such arrangements typically worked. Jennifer pulled out a folder from her briefcase. "We're prepared to offer you a modest monthly retainer in exchange for certain accommodations. Nothing that would interfere with your normal business operations." Sarah examined the documents Jennifer handed her. The proposed arrangement was surprisingly simple. Advance notice when William planned to visit, temporary reservation of certain movie titles, and the use of the back entrance when necessary to avoid crowds. This seems very reasonable, Sarah said, though she felt somewhat overwhelmed by the formal nature of it all. But I have to ask, don't you usually just tell people where they can't go rather than arranging access like this? Jennifer laughed. Usually, yes. But Prince William specifically requested this approach. He wants to continue having normal student experiences when possible, and your shop represents exactly the kind of environment he values. The arrangement included a direct phone number for the royal security team and protocols for handling media attention if it arose. Sarah was surprised by how thoroughly they had considered potential complications. "What about my other customers?" Sarah asked. "I can't have people feeling like they're unwelcome in their own community." "That's actually one of the reasons we chose to approach you," Jennifer replied. "Your handling of Friday's incident showed that you prioritize all your customers' comfort equally. We're not asking you to change that." As they discussed the practical details, Sarah began to understand how much thought went into maintaining William's university experience. The arrangements weren't about creating special privileges, but rather about preserving normal activities that most people took for granted. "There is one other matter," Jennifer said as they concluded their discussion. "The man who was taking photographs on Friday, James Crawford, he's been attempting to sell his story to various newspapers." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of story?" "Nothing particularly damaging," Jennifer assured her quickly. "Mostly exaggerated accounts of the incident, with some speculation about Prince William's attitude toward ordinary people. The photographs aren't very clear, and most reputable publications aren't interested." "What does this mean for me?" Sarah asked, worried about potential backlash from the local community. "Probably very little," Jennifer said. "But you should be prepared for possible contact from journalists. We can provide guidance on handling media inquiries if you'd like." Sarah accepted the offered media training materials, feeling increasingly like she had stepped into a world far more complex than her quiet video rental business. Yet the arrangement they had outlined seemed designed to minimize complexity rather than create it. "I have to ask," Sarah said, as Jennifer prepared to leave. "Why is this so important to Prince William? I mean, there must be dozens of ways for him to access movies without dealing with rental shops." Jennifer paused thoughtfully. "You'd have to ask him that yourself, but I suspect it's about the experience rather than just the movies. He wants to feel like a normal university student, at least occasionally. Your shop offers him that opportunity." After Jennifer left, Sarah stood alone in her shop, processing the surreal turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she had been a small business owner dealing with an unruly customer. Now, she was apparently part of the support system that allowed the future King of England to rent movies like any other student. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. She answered automatically, her mind still focused on the conversation with Jennifer. "Mitchell's video," she said into the receiver. "Hello, is this Sarah?" The voice was familiar, though she couldn't immediately place it. "Yes, this is Sarah. How can I help you?" "This is William. From Friday night. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Sarah nearly dropped the phone in surprise. "William, no, it's fine. I just finished speaking with Jennifer Walsh. Actually, so she's already been to see you," William said, sounding pleased. "Good. I hope she would explain everything properly. I wanted to call personally to make sure you were comfortable with the arrangement." "It's quite generous," Sarah replied, still adjusting to having a casual phone conversation with the future king. "Though I have to admit, it all feels a bit surreal." William laughed. "I can imagine. It probably seems like an overreaction to a simple video rental visit. But these small, normal moments are actually quite precious to me here at university." Sarah could hear voices in the background, suggesting William was calling from a common area in his student accommodation. The normalcy of university life continuing around him while he made this call struck her as oddly touching. "I wanted to ask you about something," William continued. "Jennifer mentioned that James Crawford has been trying to sell his story about Friday night. I hope that hasn't caused problems for you locally." "A few people have asked me about it," Sarah admitted. "But most folks in St. Andrews are pretty protective of university students' privacy. They understand that everyone deserves to enjoy their time here without constant harassment." That's one of the reasons I chose this university, William said. The community here has a good reputation for treating students as individuals rather than curiosities. Their conversation was interrupted by a group of students entering Sarah's shop. She recognized several of them as regular customers and waved them toward the new releases section. "I should let you get back to work," William said, clearly hearing the activity in the background. "But I did want to mention that my friend and I would like to collect those movies sometime this week. Would Tuesday evening work? It's usually quieter then." "Tuesday would be perfect," Sarah agreed. "I'll have them ready behind the counter." "Excellent. And, Sarah, thank you again for everything. What you did on Friday, it meant more than you probably realize." After William hung up, Sarah served her customers with renewed appreciation for the ordinary nature of their interactions. These students browsed casually, made jokes about their movie choices, and paid for their rentals without drama or complication. It was exactly the kind of normal experience William valued so highly. Tuesday evening arrived with typical Scottish autumn weather, cool and damp but not actively raining. Sarah had prepared for William's visit by ensuring the shop would be quiet and stocking some new releases she thought might appeal to university students. William and his friend arrived precisely at the time they had arranged, entering through the front door like any other customers. This time, there were no photographers or aggressive locals to complicate their visit. "How has your week been?" William asked as Sarah retrieved their reserved movies from behind counter. "Interesting," Sarah replied with a smile. "I've had more phone calls from journalists than customers some days. But most of them lost interest when I refused to provide quotes." "The media attention will die down," William's friend assured her. "These stories usually have very short lifespans unless someone keeps feeding them new information." William examined the shop's layout again, his curiosity about the business operations apparently continuing from their first visit. "Have you noticed any changes since Friday? In terms of customer traffic, I mean." "Actually, yes," Sarah said thoughtfully. "I've had more university students coming in. I think word has spread that this is a place where people can browse in peace without worrying about being bothered." This clearly pleased William. That's exactly what we hoped would happen. A place where everyone can just be normal customers. As they completed the rental transaction, Sarah noticed how relaxed both young men seemed compared to their first visit. The arrangement with the Royal Press Office had apparently provided them with confidence that future visits would proceed smoothly. "I've been curious about something," Sarah said as she processed their rental cards. "How did you find out about my shop in the first place?" "There are several video stores closer to the university." William exchanged a glance with his friend before answering. "Actually, we heard about it from other students. They said the owner here treats everyone fairly and doesn't make a fuss about who rents what movies. That reputation apparently extends to more than just movie preferences," his friend added with a grin. Their transaction completed, William and his friend prepared to leave with their movie selections. The entire visit had taken less than 10 minutes and proceeded exactly like any other customer interaction. "Same time next week?" William asked casually. "I'll be here," Sarah confirmed. As they reached the door, William turned back one final time. "You know, Sarah, what happened on Friday has actually influenced some discussions about how I can have normal experiences during university. Your approach is being used as an example of how these situations can work well." "I just treated you like any other customer," Sarah said, still slightly bewildered by the attention her actions had received. "Exactly," William replied. "That's rarer than you might think, and more valuable than you know." After they left, Sarah reflected on the unexpected turn her small business had taken. She had become part of a royal story simply by maintaining the same customer service standard her father had taught her years earlier. Months later, when William's university years were complete and he had moved on to the next phase of his life, people would occasionally ask Sarah about her encounters with the future king. She always gave the same answer. He was a polite young man who rented movies and returned them on time, just like any good customer should. The arrangement with the Royal Press Office had worked exactly as intended. William had been able to enjoy normal student activities. Sarah's business had thrived with increased student patronage, and the local community had maintained its reputation for respecting everyone's privacy. But perhaps most importantly, a small video rental shop in St. Andrews had demonstrated that treating people with basic courtesy and respect could have impacts far beyond what anyone might expect. Sarah never forgot that lesson, and, apparently, neither did Prince William. Years later, when Sarah eventually sold the video shop to retire, she kept one item as a memento, a membership card that had never been returned, bearing the name of William's friend but used for rentals that had helped a future king experience a small slice of ordinary life during his university days.